Well, good morning, everyone. I love that gospel story and the whole idea of Jesus walking on water. So this morning I wore my special walk on water shoes just to honor that reading. But I'm not going to preach on that one. I'm going to preach on the epistle lesson on the Paul's letter to the Ephesians, because that's such a wonderful and beautiful, beautiful prayer. So that's what I want to talk about today. So sometimes bizarre stories end up in the newspapers, right? And it seems like lately we're seeing more and more bizarre stories in the newspaper. But I like the one in New York involving Daisy Fernandez. It seems that Daisy won $2.8 million in the lottery in 1981. And subsequently, she was sued by her son's teenage friend. Well, why did he sue her? Well, it was because she had asked him to pray for her. Now, this friend, Christopher Pondo, prayed to his favorite saint. He was Catholic, and he prayed to his favorite saint. And when his prayer was answered, Christopher claimed half of Fernandez's jackpot. Seems fair to me. The case went before a panel of 5 state Supreme Court judges who ruled against the boy, declaring soberly that in a modern court, there was no way to prove the efficacy of prayer. Shucks. After comedian George Burns played God in the movie Oh God, remember that movie? It was a great movie. If you haven't seen it, you got to see that. Good movie. He received some interesting mail, and he received one letter from Milwaukee. It was addressed, God, Beverly Hills. Yeah, that's funny in itself, isn't it? Yeah. It was from a 6-year-old boy. It started out, Dear Mr. God, I know you're very busy, but I have a big favor to ask. This Sunday is our championship baseball game, and I would be very happy if you would make it not rain. Don't forget, it's this Sunday, he wrote. Burns said it evidently didn't rain because he got another letter from the boy, and it said, thanks, but we lost. You know, one of the wonderful and grand things we can do for another human being is pray for them. Is to pray for them. We're a praying church. We pray for each other here at Grace. Well, St. Paul prayed for people. In our lesson for today, St. Paul prayed for the church at Ephesus. But in a sense, he was also praying for you and me. Listen to his words once again. For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth takes its name. I pray that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant that you may be strengthened in your inner being. Notice, first of all, that St. Paul prayed that we would be strengthened. Now, is there anyone in this room who would not like to be stronger? Young guys have always enjoyed flexing their biceps. And these days, it's now socially acceptable for young women to be in the weight rooms as well. My youngest daughter, Shannon, she is an Olympic weightlifter. She was at her house the other day. She looks like this. She's got this V-shaped. She looks great. She's a weightlifter. Go figure. Now, we all want to be stronger, right? I mean, we all want to be stronger. Is there anyone in this room who wants to be weak? I don't think so. Having said that, I hope you realize that the greatest strength is not a strong body. It is strength of mind and spirit. In 1964, Al Order from the U.S. won a gold medal and set a new Olympic record in the discus throw. Now, Al accomplished all of this while suffering from a ripped cartilage in his rib cage. Now, a few days before the Olympics opened, Al had injured himself in a practice. Doctors warned him not to compete. They said that the pain would be way too much to bear. But he forced himself to compete anyway, and at his very highest level. In an interview after his winning throw, Al told reporters, he said, don't make me out to be a hero. I wanted to win, and I just gutted it out. Well, Al Order's strength went beyond being able to hurl the discus, went beyond physical strength. He had a strength of purpose and desire and determination. Now, I really admire those of you who work out on a regular basis, keep your bodies in excellent condition. My hat's off. You guys are doing great. That's an important thing. But you and I both know that muscular strength is probably the least important of the different kinds of strength. There are plenty of men and women with bulging muscles that are very weak in other important ways. They don't know what real strength is. Well, let me tell you what real strength is. Imagine you are a judge and you're serving in a tough area of Michigan. Every day, your courtroom is filled with tales of horrible crimes. The callousness of the criminals would be enough to kill your spirit. But even worse is the indifference of those who witness the crimes and do nothing to help. Such a situation would tempt most of us to despair. Such was the case of Judge Fred M. Mester, a circuit court judge from Oakland County, Michigan. Judge Mester had entered his career with high ideals and great enthusiasm. He believed in the power of the law and in making society a better place. But in his courtroom, Judge Mester was forced to confront the fact that not only does evil exist in our society, but also that evil was aided every day by the indifference and apathy of people who were in a position to stop it. He began to lose faith in his career, and he began to lose faith in people as well. But one young man changed all of that. Judge Mester was trying a particularly hideous case. A 13-year-old girl had been beaten and raped by 8 men in a crack house. The only witness who came forward to convict the men was a 14-year-old boy named Kenneth. Both of Kenneth's parents had died, and few of his relatives wanted him. He had been shuffled around to various houses, never knowing where his next meal might come from. On his first night living in the crack house, Kenneth had witnessed his older brother and 7 other men raping and beating this young girl. When the men left the girl alone, Kenneth got her out of the house and sent her to the police station. And then he called the police to report what he had seen. Even though he had no choice but to live with his older brother, even though he knew his brother's friends were definitely going to try and kill him for his actions, Kenneth never hesitated to tell the truth about the crime. That's strength. In talking with one of the detectives on the case, Judge Mester discovered that Kenneth's mother had taken him to church every Sunday up until her death. She had instilled in him positive values that he couldn't turn away from in the most trying of times. But there's more to the story. After the rape trial, Kenneth's family rejected him completely because he turned in his brother. But strangers who heard of his courage were more than eager to help. Churches took up a collection for him, and a family in Canada took him in and enrolled him in school. Kenneth went on to college, and he studied psychology and biology. He dreamt of working as a counselor in the inner city. When the Detroit Lions football team heard Kenneth's story, they collected money for him and gave him a part-time job with their organization. And thanks to Kenneth's courageous example, Judge Mester had his faith in goodness restored. You've seen people with bulging biceps, but have you ever had the privilege of meeting anyone as strong as Kenneth? Well, here's a more important question. Do you and I have that kind of strength? You and I, for the most part, we live such easy lives. And such living is rarely conducive to building spiritual and moral muscles. Many of us need to pray for strength. Strength for carrying heavy burdens, yes, but also strength in facing moral dilemmas. St. Paul's first prayer is that we would be strong in our inner being. Paul also prayed that we would know the love of God. He writes, "And that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, as you are being rooted and grounded in love. I pray that you will have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge." I ran across a fascinating story in psychology today that I filed a while back in my marriage file. It was about happily married couples and how they regard each other, how they kind of see each other. Now, according to a trio of Canadian researchers, couples are most satisfied with their relationship with their partners when they see each other through rose-colored glasses. Now, while common sense suggests that relationships work best when each partner accurately sees the other's strengths and weaknesses, a team of psychologists found just the opposite. Yeah. They asked 180 couples a series of questions about themselves, about their partner, their ideal partner, and their satisfaction with the relationship. For the most part, they discovered individuals viewed their partners in a more positive light than their partners saw themselves. And in the happiest relationship, there was an outright frenzy of mutual delusion. I love that phrase, an outright frenzy of mutual delusion. Isn't that a great phrase? I just love that. But each partner saw the absolute best in his or her significant other, regardless of the person's actual attributes. That's the way we see people we love, isn't it? I mean, don't we do that? The rest of the world may see them as scoundrels, but we see their positive points, not their negative ones. Their strengths, not their weaknesses. We have this outright frenzy of mutual delusion going on here. Now, do you understand that this is the way God looks at us? Do you understand that? Through rose-colored glasses. God sees our strengths, our possibilities, our virtues. Our sin, God takes that and he casts it into the deepest part of the sea. Hey, God says, see that gray-haired guy down there? And Gabriel says, you mean that homely guy with the funny nose? And God says, hey, be careful there. You're talking about one of my children. I think he's beautiful. If we wanted to use a biblical image here, we could say that God's glasses are perhaps rose-colored because of the sacrificial blood of Christ. When we understand that God looks at us through rose-colored glasses, then we can begin to look at others in the same way. We begin looking for the good in others and not the evil. And when we do that, we'll often see that self-fulfilling prophecy in action. People will return the love that we show them. In 1972, a young man from India set out to bicycle around the world. On one leg of his journey, a mugger accosted him, and the mugger held him at gunpoint and demanded his money. Why do you want my money, brother? The Indian guy asked. What do you mean, brother? The mugger asked, bewildered. Well, we're all brothers, the Indian guy replied. Who are you? What are you doing? The mugger asked. Well, I'm bicycling around the world on $23, said the Indian guy. Well, how are you going to make it around the world on $23? The mugger asked. Well, with the help of kind people like you, the Indian guy replied. Well, at this, the perplexed mugger reaches into his pocket, pulls out his wallet, and gives the guy a bunch of money, wants to help. It's amazing. It's just amazing when you approach people with love, how they will respond with love. Now, not always, of course, not every single time. There are evil people in this world who have never known God's love, and therefore they have no reservoir of love to draw from. But that's the exception. That's the exception. Paul says that prays that we will be made strong, and he also prays that we might be filled with the love of God. And finally, he prays that we'll be filled with all the fullness of God. Here's the good news that you and I have come to hear today. You and I can be filled with the fullness of God. As you all know by now, I'm a very stoic and unemotional person. So I tell this next story, and I can never tell the story without getting emotional. So let's see how I do. Okay? Let me tell you about Josh. Okay? Josh was a part of our youth program at Grace about 30 years ago when I was in charge of the program. Josh was our token atheist. Okay, every youth program needs a resident atheist, right, Chad? Every youth program has a resident atheist, okay? Josh was brilliant, scientific mind. He was very sharp. And somehow he just couldn't, with his scientific knowledge, he couldn't fit God into it. And so he always said he didn't believe in God. And he was never afraid to tell you that, by the way. So we all knew he was our resident atheist. Josh was on one of our first youth mission trips to Mexico, okay? And he went the first time out of curiosity, and he thought it might be fun. And he had fun, and he learned a lot. The second year, he went with the team because he wanted to get to know the kids in our group better. He said he didn't really spend time with everybody, so this year he's going to spend time with every single person, get to know them. And he did. He made special effort to do that and did a good job. By the time the third trip to Mexico came around, there were some changes happening within Josh. That third year, I noticed that while we were at the orphanage, there was a little orphan girl who adopted Josh. And she would follow him around like a duck follows its mother. Everywhere he went, you'd see this little girl, right? Well, on the way back that year, we were at our last stop at Grant's little church in Grants Pass, Oregon. That was kind of our tradition. We stopped there last night before we got home. And that night we gathered in the dimly lit sanctuary around the altar to pray and have communion together. That was our tradition. As I usually did, I had someone open the prayer time, and then I asked someone to close the prayer time, and then invited anyone else who wanted to share a prayer aloud or just pray silently in their heart. So as the candles flickered there on the altar, a few of the kids prayed out loud as usual, a few of the adults. But this time, one of them was Josh. I'd never heard him say anything religious, let alone pray. And this was a magnificent, heartfelt prayer. It was amazing, amazing. Well, then we got back home, and we shared our experience, as we used to do in an adult forum out there in the fellowship hall. We shared our experience, and Josh was one of the youth who wanted to speak. And so he told about his faith journey, and he told about the impact that the Mexico mission had on his life. And then he told about the little orphan girl who stole his heart. He said that she had carried with her a little jingle bell everywhere she went. He was convinced that it was the only toy that she owned. It was the only thing she owned of her own, right? So then when we got ready to leave the orphanage, which is always a really emotional time, okay, she gave that little bell to Josh. She gave him the bell. And then, while he was speaking, he reached into his pocket. He took out the bell, tossed it in the air, put it back in his pocket. And he said simply, I don't go anywhere without it. That's not the end of the story. So several years later, after graduating from college, Josh had joined a church in another state. He moved to another state, got a job in a big computer firm, and he joined a Lutheran Church there. Well, their youth program was fairly small, but they didn't have anything like our Mexico mission thing. So Josh started a youth mission trip to Mexico. You see, the fullness of God had come to live in Josh's heart. And that's my prayer for you. Just as St. Paul prayed for the people there at Ephesus, I pray that you would become a stronger person within, that you would be able to see others through the eyes of God's love. And that through prayer, through worship, through reading the Bible, hanging out with God's people, coming to the Lord's table, that you would be filled with the fullness of God. Isn't that what you really want? Isn't that why we're here? Amen. Thanks for watching. I hope this video can further the discussion of your relationship with Christ, either at home or maybe in the comments below.